When it comes to remakes, I always hit a mental impasse about what I think when it comes to the idea of remaking a story that has already been told. I do my utmost best to separate nostalgia from what actually made it great to begin with. Even more so when you go back to experience it yet again and realize that it was either better or worse than you remember. When the Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced back in 2015, it was a mixture of excitement and disappointment. Excitement because I was interested in seeing what they could do with the technology we have now. Disappointed because, and I'll be real with you, Final Fantasy VII was never my favorite game in the series. And it is my belief that better stories have been told in the franchise before VII's rise. That being said, I've always accepted the fact that Final Fantasy VII has a rather large and dedicated fan base, and if there was any game in the series to get the royal remake treatment, this would be it. So what ultimately became of the remake at the end of the day? And just how did it end up on my list? Allow me to give you the rundown. If you've played the original, then you have a general idea of what Final Fantasy VII's story centers on. A corporation by the name of Shinra is making bank off of using up the naturally created energy of the planet, which is referred to as Mako. As you'd expect, the continued use of this resource is actually hurting the planet. Our heroes, part of the group known as Avalanche, are dead set on revealing the truth of this to the citizens of Midgar, so they fight back against Shinra. It's the most involved episode of Captain Planet yet.
Your powers combined, I am Captain Planet!
Within the first hour, things go wrong and our Avalanche heroes get branded as terrorists as one of their attempts to shut down one of Shinra's Maka reactors goes awry. Kicking off our heroes' attempts at stopping Shinra from using this attack as a means to completely erase the slums by which our heroes take up residence, and show the world just who and what Shinra really is. The remake encompasses the entire Midgar section of the original, but does not tell the story of Final Fantasy VII in its entirety. With that said, there are a few twists and turns added here and there that were not in the original, so that even veterans are treated with more than just a simple retelling of the story. Most of the cast is here in some form or another, brought to life with fantastic VO and modern visual technologies that bring it as close as possible to a pure CG film.
Can you bear to see the planet suffer? Cloud.
Where the original game demonstrated the evolution of turn-based combat from 2D to 3D, the remake demonstrates the evolution of turn-based combat to real-time combat. But this doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely lost the strategic component that made the turn-based combat of the original so engaging. Nor has it gone full-on Devil May Cry mode. Something that many were concerned about when they announced that combat would be real-time for the remake. Similar to the original, the game kicks off by throwing you right into this new form of combat. Players have the option to button mash their way through it, as enemies are low level and easy to run through. As the intro ramps up, the game pushes players into using more tactical options such as abilities and magic to stagger enemies, making them more vulnerable to more powerful attacks. Each character is capable of using weapons and magic depending on how you spec them. You may force them to specialize more in one than the other. Guarding and dodging is incredibly important this time, as you're not relying on RNG to determine whether or not an attack misses your squad. Each character plays differently to some degree. Melee characters such as Cloud and Tifa need to get in close to really take advantage of their abilities, while characters like Barret and Aerith are ranged, allowing them to attack from the sidelines and hit enemies with powerful attacks. But the game never forces you to have to make these decisions in real time. At any point you can slow down the action and give yourself more time to assess the situation and determine the proper strategy to handle specific encounters. That's not to say that the spirit of the original turn-based combat is gone. In fact, the game includes a classic mode that, while not completely recreating the turn-based feel, does give players a more strategic component to a game that prides itself on real-time combat. Ever since the PS3 tech demo in 2005, Final Fantasy VII fans have been pining for a remake for years. When the game was formally announced in 2015, the gaming world cheered in unison. The end result was a game that takes advantage of nearly all the modern development technologies of today, such as Unreal Engine 4. The world of Midgard is brought to life in a way that blows the original PS3 demo out of the water. Character models are given a meticulous amount of detail from the hair and faces to the textures and materials in their clothing. Being fully voiced this time around gives a better understanding of the dynamic between specific characters in the game. For example, Jesse's thirst for Cloud was evident in the original, but seeing it voiced and acted in the remake takes it to another level.
Real joy to work with, huh?
Real joy to look at, too.
Here we go.
Looks are what people notice first.
Guess I'm not on the same page as people.
The slums of Midgard this time around have an atmosphere of crowded and run down, with homes that are barely holding together, and having the world be fully modeled showcases that well. However, while there is a copious amount of detail in the environments of Midgar, the slums are also where the technological limitations are showcased at their strongest. Textures stream in at an incredibly slow rate, resulting in some flat-looking roads and buildings that just look unfinished, until a few seconds pass. I'm still waiting for the day when I go back to Cloud's apartment and that door texture finally loads. Yes, even on the PS5's SSD, this texture may as well be non-existent. But this leads credence to the game's overall quality of its visuals, where incongruencies stick out more because of how good it looks. This is all supplemented by amazing remakes of the game's original score, with a few twists that even took me by surprise as a veteran player. Well, except one track that has basically become a meme at this point with how awful it is. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a fantastic retelling and reimagining of a classic RPG that, for many, was the entry point into the series. While it may have taken over a decade to finally happen, the end product was worth the wait, even though it's not a completed retelling of the original story. Remakes come in hot and fast these days in an industry that, to be quite frank, is clearly short on ideas. Bringing these beloved characters to life is no easy task, and yet somehow Square Enix managed to do that and more, making new fans and old fans fall in love with them once again. And it's clear that Square Enix isn't quite done with it yet, as they announced new DLC and even a PS5 upgrade planned for the summer, which means that they are dedicated to making what once started as a tech demo into a fully fledged reality. While Final Fantasy VII isn't my favorite Final Fantasy game in the series, the remake has certainly renewed my love of its world and characters, and that alone is commendable itself. Hence why Final Fantasy VII Remake has earned its spot as one of my favorite games of 2020. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and hit that bell icon to get notified on the rest of my list as soon as those videos drop. There's also a community Discord and a Patreon for those that want to get involved and support me. As always, this is Corrupt Ronin telling you to stay sharp, assassins, and I'll see you next time.